President Yoon will call for efforts to lower housing prices and provide more homes. Safeguards to prevent rent scams and to provide updated info on the real estate market and landlords are being planned. Local health authorities are setting aside 4,000 hospital beds for COVID-19 patients in case the daily tally spikes. To step up virus detection, 70 more screening centers will be opened nationwide. The former presidential office expands guided tours. Nighttime visits are allowed, providing a whole new view of Cheongwade. Hello and welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's begin with our top story. At the latest emergency economy meeting, President Yoon Suk-yeol focused on the housing situation in the nation. He vowed to strengthen safety net for Koreans and to root out rent or lease frauds. Yoon Jung-min starts us off.
Affordable housing for all is what President Yoon stressed for the second time this week on Wednesday during an emergency economy meeting at a public rental housing complex south of Seoul.
주거 안정과 주거 복지는 민생 안정의 핵심입니다. 정부는 끊어진 주거의 기회 사다리를 복원하고 촘촘하고 든든한 주거 안전망을 구축하겠습니다.
He laid out government measures such as freezing interest rates on mortgages and housing rent loans, expanding the limit on lease loans to newlyweds, and temporarily easing the cap on loans for low-income tenants with expiring contracts. Not only that, the prosecutor general turned president showed his determination to root out what's been dubbed 전세 frauds.
무엇보다 전세 사기와 같이 민생을 위협하는 범죄는 강력한 수사를 통해 일벌백계 하겠습니다.
In South Korea, a 전세 tenant gives the landlord a lump sum deposit to lease the house free of monthly rent. The owner invests the deposit and returns it to the tenant when the lease expires. However, with this unique system, there have been criminal cases where tenants could not retrieve their 전세 lump sum deposits from homeowners. At the same time, the government aims to provide more homes. Some 25,000 new public homes will be available for rent within the second half of this year, while the ultimate goal is to provide at least 1 million affordable public homes within Yoon's term in office. And the government encourages private companies for more provision in urban areas for which there will be tax incentives and easing of some regulations. On top of that, the president has hinted at overhauling the laws related to the nation's current rent rolls. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Seoul's finance chief highlighted that the nation's economy is on a mild recovery track, but geopolitical uncertainties are slowing its pace. These may also contribute to further sluggish growth. Shin Se-byuk tells us more.
The Ministry of Economy and Finance have expressed concerns over an economic slowdown in South Korea for the second consecutive month amid worsened external economic conditions. According to the monthly Green Book Economic Assessment report on Wednesday, inflationary pressure has mounted both at home and abroad, which could lead to export growth losing steam. Citing multiple geopolitical risks such as Fed's fast rate hikes, China's economic slowdown, and the prolonged war in Ukraine, the report noted these factors could bring further volatility to the Korean economy. However, the country is on a mild recovery track thanks to improvement in the job market and a rebound in in-person services. South Korea's industrial production in all sectors increased as well. In particular, the manufacturing and service sectors both posted almost 7.5% on-year growth in the month of May. Also, exports, the main driver of the country's economic growth, rose 5.2% on-year in June on demand for chips and petroleum products. It marked 20 months straight that exports have extended their gains, although it was the first time in 16 months that exports posted a single-digit growth figure. One expert said this is because of the so-called stagflation, a mix of slumping growth and high inflation.
Concerns about stagflation, mostly caused by skyrocketing energy prices abroad, are growing amid economic slowdown in South Korea, and that's what hinders the country's export growth.
Meanwhile, the expert said that it's not just external uncertainties, but also domestic factors such as the resurgence in COVID-19 that could accelerate slowdown risk. 신새벽, Arirang News.
The National Assembly resumed normal functions almost 2 months since its last plenary session. Rival lawmakers agreed to set up a provisional legislative committee that will allow non-contentious bills related to public livelihoods to be passed as soon as possible. Yoon explains further.
In South Korea, each National Assembly term runs for 4 years. The 21st reaches halfway point in May. The much-delayed second term finally kicked off on Wednesday, while standing committees remain vacant due to disputes over leadership positions. So the first thing lawmakers did was pass a resolution to set up a special committee which will pick up the slack.
The special committee will be reviewing and passing bills related to lowering fuel tax, standardizing industrial unit costs, real estate taxes, business meal tax deductions, and refunding public transportation fees.
The 13-member committee will consist of 6 members each from the ruling People Power Party and the Democratic Party, and 1 independent or minor party lawmaker. Using its legislative rights, the committee can put bills to a final vote on the condition of bipartisan consensus. The committee will last until the end of October. Also marking the start to the second half of the 21st National Assembly, the full leader of the majority Democratic Party delivered a speech. Following 2 election defeats, the Progressive Party vowed to revamp itself to win back the general public, saying its top priority is people's livelihoods. In fact, that phrase was mentioned 17 times throughout the speech, putting pressure on President Yoon and his PPP.
I call for your efforts with people's livelihoods. Our party promises full cooperation on anything that's related to improving people's livelihoods.
The DP also saw it as a chance to take a swipe at President Yoon mainly over what were seen as controversial picks for the cabinet and his office. The PPP is poised to deliver its own speech on Thursday. Thursday is also promised deadline for the 2 parties to finalize the leadership positions for 18 standing committees. Once they do that, the parliament will be able to return to work at full scale. Yoon, Arirang News.
Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering had to stop production at its main shipyard for several weeks as the site is occupied by subcontractors demanding better pay. The government warned the strike is illegal, and there are protests on the other side by employees whose livelihoods are on the line as well. Kim Do-yeon has the full story.
The protest is only growing, now almost 50 days since an initial 100 subcontractors first occupied the main shipyard of Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering in Gyeonggi, Gyeongsangnam-do Province. According to local reports, nearly 10,000 members and supporters of the Korean Metal Workers Union are protesting not only Daewoo Shipbuilding and its contractors, but also the government. Even in Seoul on Wednesday, thousands marched near the presidential office in Yongsan-gu district. At this point, local reports say negotiations between the two sides are making progress. The company has insisted on a pay increase of no more than 4.5%, while the union has lowered its demand to a raise of 5%. The strike began early last month with these 4 demands. Return to the pay level of 5 years ago, when Daewoo Shipbuilding cut pay by 30% at a time when South Korea's shipbuilding industry was struggling. Increase bonuses for contractors by 300%. Recognize labor union activities as legitimate work so the company fully compensates labor union officers. Lastly, create a designated area for labor union headquarters. In the meantime, there have been growing voices against the union as well, especially from the employees of Daewoo Shipbuilding, whose livelihoods are now also at stake due to the stop in production. Around 4,000 employees protested Wednesday against the union at the main shipyard. According to the company, the halt in production has cost the company around $460 million so far. In an effort to resolve the situation, minister-level officials have gone to the site of the strike in the past few days, but to no avail. The Minister of Employment and Labor, Lee Jung-sik, is due to resume talks with the union Wednesday evening to try to find common ground. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The nation's COVID-19 tally remains in concerning levels. Most recently, more than 150 high school students and teachers who had returned from field trips contracted the virus. Authorities announced measures to protect vulnerable people and ramp up testing. In-person visits to nursing homes will not be allowed, and they're setting aside more hospital beds. Yoon brings the updates.
For the second day straight, South Korea has reported over 70,000 new COVID-19 infections. The exact tally on Wednesday is at 76,402. Officials forecast that this figure will soon go above 100,000.
We originally thought we would see up to 200,000 daily COVID-19 infections between August and October. But BA.5 and other variants are spreading quickly, so we may see this resurgent wave peak earlier than we expected. So now, we are forecasting that by late August, we could see up to 280,000 daily infections.
As of now, BA.5 accounts for more than half of all COVID-19 infections, up from roughly 24% in the first week of July. But with Omicron spreading rapidly, health authorities on Wednesday decided to impose extra antivirus measures. This includes banning in-person visits at nursing facilities and requiring staff there to take a PCR test once a week. Authorities have also decided to set aside an extra 4,000 hospital beds for COVID-19 patients. This is if cases shoot up to 300,000 per day. As of now, the country has around 5,700 hospital beds, enough to handle up to 150,000 COVID-19 daily cases. Though only a quarter of these beds are in use, authorities are trying to be prepared. Officials are also stepping up virus detection efforts. 70 more screening centers will open up nationwide, and from Wednesday, all convenience stores will be able to sell self-test kits. Originally, only around 47% of them were doing so. Yoon, Arirang News.
The nation's foreign minister wrapped up a visit to Japan. Park Jin said the two sides agreed to review and negotiate to resolve their diplomatic row, namely Tokyo's export curbs against Seoul. Kim Dami shares with us his remarks.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Park Jin, arriving back from high-level meetings in Japan on Wednesday, said Seoul and Tokyo are going to continue talks about restoring their sharing of military information and Japan lifting its restrictions on exports to Korea. Speaking at Seoul's Gimpo Airport, Minister Park said the two countries agreed to address the export restrictions, especially at a time when there are global supply chains issues. Those restrictions are what prompted Seoul to allow the General Security Military Information Agreement to lapse. He said he explained what Seoul is trying to do to resolve the forced labor compensation issue. In response to Park's request for meaningful action, he said Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida listened carefully and pledged to keep working with Korea to resolve the matter. Park also told reporters in Tokyo earlier Wednesday that he felt that the Japanese government is willing to respond positively to South Korea's efforts. And during an interview with Japan's NHK News the same day, Park also said that he let Japan know about Korean victims' request to speak directly with related Japanese firms on the issue. Also included in the talks were ways to activate the two countries' people-to-people exchanges, which they believe will be helpful in improving bilateral ties, as well as the general sentiment between Korean and Japanese people. As for the possibility of resuming visa-free entry in both countries, there was agreement on the need to do so, but no further details were released. Park also said the same day that he's planning to visit China next month following his recent trips to the U.S. and Japan. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
South Korea and Saudi Arabia celebrate their 60th anniversary of friendship and pledge to pursue new opportunities. Foreign Minister Park Jin met with a visiting Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud. He recognized Saudi Arabia as an essential partner in economic cooperation in the Middle East. The Saudi FM highlighted that the bond between the two countries is much deeper than their diplomatic relations. Earlier, President Yoon told Al Saud that Saudi Arabia is South Korea's biggest crude oil supplier, as well as an economic and energy security partner. The visiting diplomat highlighted the contributions made by South Korean firms and workers to his country's infrastructure development and expressed interest in beefing up cooperation in renewable energy and IT. South Korea tested its first domestically developed supersonic fighter on Tuesday. The pilots who flew the jet said it wasn't too difficult to control and that the KF-21 is a powerful machine. Bae-eun-ji reports.
South Korea's newly developed 4.5 generation fighter, the KF-21, successfully completed its maiden test flight on Tuesday, making the country only the 8th in the world to have developed its own supersonic fighter jet. A prototype of the KF-21 took off from Sachon Airport at 3:40 p.m. that afternoon and flew for around 30 minutes at 400 kilometers per hour. Major An Jun-hyun, who was a flight instructor for the country's KT-1 trainer aircraft, made the historic first flight. Major An went through a year of different types of training to get ready. He admitted during an interview on the day after the test flight that he felt very nervous beforehand, but everything went smoothly after takeoff.
I'll never forget the exact moment when the wheels left the ground. I felt pressured, but at the same time I was deeply moved.
The purpose of the test flight was to check whether a newly developed fighter can take off and land safely.
The actual flight was very much similar to the simulator, and because it has two engines, acceleration was very powerful. It wasn't difficult to take off, land, or complete the mission with the aircraft.
Major An added that successfully completing the first test flight is not the end, but only the beginning. For the next 4 years, more prototypes of the KF-21 will be put through around 2,200 more test flights. Bae-eun-ji, Arirang News.
The U.S. State Department released its annual Trafficking in Persons report, which evaluates anti-trafficking efforts by governments across the world. South Korea slid down from top-tier ranking for the first time in 2 decades. Min Suk-hyun fills us in.
South Korea no longer belongs to the Tier 1 category in the U.S. State Department's Human Trafficking Report. The country has been downgraded to Tier 2 for not fully meeting the minimum international standards for eliminating trafficking. In the 2022 Trafficking in Persons report shared on Tuesday, the State Department says South Korea failed to keep up with sustained efforts to root out trafficking, citing fewer prosecutions and investigations of suspected traffickers. It also raised concerns over the country's victim identification guidelines and the court's light sentences for trafficking-related crimes. It's a big shock for the country, which had been listed in Tier 1 for the past 2 decades. The report now calls on the government to do more to protect victims, prosecute traffickers, and prevent trafficking. Matthew Friedman, an expert on human trafficking, says South Korea can do better to protect the victims.
Let's say that a person was tricked and deceived and forced into prostitution, which could be an illegal activity. But because they were not identified as being a traffic victim, when in fact they were, because the protocol doesn't identify them as that, they could go to jail for doing illegal activities.
Friedman warns that it's important to identify victims and protect them so that they don't end up in jail for the illegal activities they were forced to do. Another point he mentions is the lenient punishment for traffickers in South Korea.
Oftentimes, the legal system, although it works to arrest people, the crime punishment is very lean. And it could be less than a year for a trafficker. So if the punishment is very lean, then there's more of a temptation to traffic people because even if you get caught, the implications are not really extreme.
Seoul's foreign ministry expressed its disappointment over the downgrade, saying it will closely review the report with relevant ministries to see if there are any parts that need to be corrected or clarified. The ministry explained that the results do not mean that the country's anti-trafficking efforts have been weakened or that the human rights situation has worsened. It said the annual report focuses on whether there's been more progress made compared to the previous year. Along with South Korea, Japan, Norway, and Switzerland were also listed in Tier 2, while North Korea and China remained in the lowest rank, Tier 3. Min Suk-hyun, Arirang News.
South Korea is the second most powerful passport in the world with hassle-free access to 192 countries. Henley and Partners released a ranking using its own quarterly index which assesses the value of citizenships around the world based on which passports provide the most visa-free or visa-on-arrival access. Japan led the way with easy entry to 193 countries, just one more than South Korea and Singapore. Germany and Spain were tied at third, the U.S. 7th, Russia 50th, and China 69th. Afghanistan finished last with easy access to only 27 countries. Bloomberg reports COVID-19 has played a part in reversing pre-pandemic rankings that were dominated by European nations. The nation's former presidential office is offering guided tours at night. Those lucky enough to book a spot will get to see 청와대 in a whole new light. Issue provides a sneak peek.
The gates open and an imposing sight appears. It is 청와대, or the Blue House, opening to the public for the first time in the evening. Hosted by South Korea's Cultural Heritage Administration, the special nighttime tour provides a different view of the Blue House. Across from what's called the Grand Garden sits the symbolic main building. Here behind me, you can see the iconic blue tiles that make up the roof of 본관, or the main office hall where the presidents of South Korea carried out their day-to-day office work. The tour takes the group around the Blue House starting at the main office hall. Guests can enter the building where they can view paintings handpicked by former presidents. Up the stairs is a large painting of the Korean peninsula depicting the country's natural landscape. The highlight of the main office hall is, of course, the large open presidential office. Also in the building is the room of the First Lady, called the Room of the Rose of Sharon. Leaving the main office hall, the visitors are led to the 관저, or presidential residence, where a performance by a 가야금 and cello duet awaits them. The building is where the presidents and their families resided. The next stop is the 상춘제 reception house, which boasts a traditional style of architecture. 상춘제 is where informal talks and tea were held with guests from outside the Blue House. It is where former President Moon Jae-in spoke with former U.S. President Donald Trump. Next, along the trail surrounding Nokjiwon, a large garden boasting around 120 species of plants, are colorful lasers that light up the trees and bushes. After a mesmerizing sight in the garden only offered in the evening, visitors are led back to near the entrance by the main office hall and dark backdrop of Bugaksan Mountain. Visitors say that the tour is a mesmerizing experience.
It's just very touching to be able to see the history of such a country like Korea. And it's very beautiful to be able to see not only the background, but also see how we're integrating and how everything is changing through the years.
The tours start on July 20th and last for 12 days. Over 55,000 people entered the entrance raffle in late June and early July, but with just 2 90-minute tours a day and each tour allowing 50 people, only 1,200 people will have the chance to enjoy an evening stroll around the Blue House through this special program. 이시후, 아리랑 뉴스.
Another monsoonal rain front entered the country tonight. Expect nationwide showers to continue until tomorrow morning. This time, rain will be concentrated across the south of the country. Up to 80 millimeters are in the forecast for the south coast. 전라도, 경상도 provinces as well as Jeju Island will see about 20 to 70. Keep in mind that locally heavy downpours are possible across Chungcheongdo provinces and the south. Containing thunder and lightning, local downpours of 30 millimeters per hour are in the forecast overnight. The risk of flooding across low-lying areas will increase, so for those in the area, please be extra careful. In the meantime, conditions across southern regions will be much breezier tomorrow, and heat wave will take a brief respite. Rainy spells will dominate for the morning hours. Lows in Seoul will be kicking off at 24 degrees. Daily highs in Seoul will be reaching 31 degrees. Daejeon and Gwangju 30. Daegu will be reaching 28 degrees. On Friday, the Seoul metropolitan area will see scattered outbreaks of rainfall. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
Time to wrap things up. As always, thank you for staying with us.